back for part 2 of my Venezuelan episode here. I wanted to critique socialism from the left, if I can. Some of the criticisms that I think I have expressed to my friends who are more ardent about how to govern a society under a socialist society. I think a couple things that we have to remember. First off, if the current solutions to our economic problems is state ownership of private businesses, I don't see how that's going to really solve problems that we currently experience today. And I think that that's a point few people want to take up is why? Here's the issue. If you want the state to own things, how is the price of the goods that the state makes going to be determined? So that's one issue, is pricing. Often happens, and oftentimes what we've seen throughout history, the state subsidizes the price below the actual cost and thus is able to sell the good to a mass number of people, large number of consumers, very cheap price. That's great. The problem with that is it creates essentially two things. First, there's less of those goods around eventually because everyone can buy them because they're so cheap. But the second one is the government that makes the revenues from selling the goods is eventually going to realize they've sold too little. They're going to have to take money in the future if they want to produce it again. They're essentially losing money each year in production. They're losing money in producing things. So there's a scarcity argument. There aren't goods around. And then there's a bigger argument of will the government have other sources of revenue to produce shoes and all these other things. I think we've reached a point where if we realize government's going to intervene and produce things like healthcare and education that are goods that we can't necessarily return, that they're goods that require that we don't put profit necessarily in front of other motives. I mean, if people need to get healthy because they're sick, people aren't going to say, well, you should just be sick and die. That is part of, I think, the battle today is the socialistic productions is this scarcity. But if I want to think about a larger aspect of things, kind of from a broader perspective, socialism is what is the incentive in a socialist economy for the workers to produce? Because if you think about it, in at least capitalism, people go out to work because they want to get paid, because they want to own things, they want to buy things, they want to spend that money. But I would assume mass consumption and mass culture is always critiqued under socialist theories. So workers are out there earning money. Are they earning money because they want to build a bigger home, bigger house? Then how is that any different than what capitalism produces, right? So there's a question of what is the point of working? And this is another critique that I've had is what is the incentive in the socialist economy for anybody to take a risk in creating a new product? People are going to sink in money into creating a new product. They're looking, hopefully, to make a return on their investment. They want to spend money today, produce a product, put it out to market, advertise, etc. And hopefully the sales of that good will increase over time. But why would anybody, if they do all feel comfortable, they're all guaranteed healthcare, housing, a job, and anything like that, why would anybody take a risk in the society to create a new product? And I don't think these questions that I'm kind of throwing out there, that I don't really have good answers for, but they're the main questions that I ask my friends. And how will, if the government controlled things or if we had more socialism in the economy, what new problems will be created? Because ultimately, I think new sets of problems would be created in the economy if the government alone controlled a lot of the businesses, right? Placing private ownership with government bureaucracy, I don't know if that's going to actually produce the results people are looking for. Although it seems popular today, and I get why, because we've sort of been in this neoliberal, privatized, fiefdom-like economy. Some say it's been severely corrupt. I would say it's been severely corrupted by powerful moneyed interests. They're creating their own oligarchy within the economy. And I can see the temptation to break that by using the power of the state and to break up the enterprises. That I totally get. And I'd be 100% in support of that. But I wonder what alternatives there are in socialism for the government not to control the production, to control the businesses, not to control all of these other issues that have come up in history. I mean, look at, okay, so there are multiple types of socialism, right? The most economies are a mix. and here I'm thinking of Western Europe, between state ownership, the government owns it, and then there's private enterprises. But there are other countries that have gone much further and have the state own many things. And oftentimes they've reverted back to allowing private ownerships to be motivated by their own greed and all of these things. Their motivations to change up enterprise, change goods, to slash the number of labor union and make everything precarious, right? Make your job and wages contingent on how many hours you're working, how productive you are, laying people off. That's sort of been the mantra for the last, well, for a long time, but at least in the last 40 years. And so we've kind of reached, I think, a saturation point that now people feel like, look, businesses and enterprise and small businesses and big, large corporations have been doing extremely well. Their shareholders are extremely wealthy. And now people feel like they're working harder and harder and not earning as much. And of course, this all comes back to declining wages. Truth is, income through wages is been stagnated, not going up. But if you're making money because you own property, you own shares, private companies and things like this, and you're getting dividend payments each quarter, you're getting a set check based on the amount of ownership of capital that you have. That's where the wealth is today, in large parts. That's where the wealth explosion has been happening, is that part hasn't been democratized. But I want to give out an alternative as well. And this one I'm partial to, so it's hard for me to critique. But there's been an increasing conversation among many people on the left about creating an alternative economy that doesn't involve the government control of things. Federal government is what I'm thinking of mostly here. But there are alternatives, so I'm going to give out a few. So one is North Dakota, state-owned bank that can invest in local projects. You have localized internet control. This one, I'm thinking of Chattanooga, Tennessee. You have Nebraska, ownership of the electrical grid. You have many alternatives in the economy to localize, decentralized control. And of course, there are alternatives other people on the left promote about worker cooperatives, worker ownerships, and different forms of revenue sharing, profit share, all of these different models that people exist today. And I say that is most exciting because I don't think in large scale people have tried those models, especially with the technology that we have today, that people who work at a company should share in the revenue, that or in other companies, smaller companies, people cooperatively come together, work, and then decide collectively how to share profits that they make each month or each quarter. Look, it adds new problems, perhaps, within the company, but it also creates an exciting new avenue, new ventures for people to explore. And I think this model isn't entirely crazy. I know Zappos has tried it. Haven't followed it recently, but a couple of years ago, they tried this model of decentralized workplace. And many people think that that's the future of work. It is that you're able to work anywhere you want. You come in the hours, you do the hours. People know you're doing the hours because you're responding to emails. And today, the way the surveillance economy works, they're able to follow you around, exactly know what you're doing. If you're just surfing online, looking at posts and Facebook chatting and all this thing, the company's going to know that and know that you're not doing work, so they won't pay you for that. There are new models coming in, often because of the technological change that has happened, that offers alternatives to this dichotomy of state-owned versus private ownership. Look, a cooperative model that's locally owned by shareholders within the community. There's a lot of farmer co-ops that do these models. They're not entirely crazy. I stated the local internet in Chattanooga, Nebraska, state ownership of the electricity, state-owned bank in North Dakota that's been exploring, I believe, some of the oil. Why couldn't a state-owned bank in Vermont or Massachusetts fund green projects, renewable energies? I don't know why. And is the model there necessarily just for profit? No, it could be invest in nonprofit green energy solutions for the future and actually begin to align the interests of the environment with nonprofit energy sectors and alternatives that both are healthy for the environment and creating new energy jobs and new technologies. Sort of that creative model to me makes a lot more sense than I think we've had previously. Because as I said earlier in the episode about Venezuela, when the government tries to control a lot of things, you begin to create lots of problems. I mean, primarily inflation just begins to skyrocket at very, very high levels. I mean, in Venezuela, you're at tens of thousands of percent, maybe more. I don't know if the point, you sort of stop counting after it gets crazy. The amount of inflation, prices are constantly moving. They're changing by the hour. if not by the minute. And you destroy the economy. You destroyed everything you built previously when you go down this route. And so, look, am I saying that that doesn't happen when the economy is private? Of course, it happens when the economy is private. But oftentimes when the state tries to own many industries, companies they own can fail. Another issue that I don't think a lot of people on the left have, and I should have said this earlier, but is if the state owns something and there's no competition, what incentive does the state have in creating a new industry or in creating competition? So you own a product, you want to get a telephone installed, but the state it owns all the telephone companies and all the telephone technology. What incentive do they have to deliver your phone on time and actually working? None. There's no competition. They know they own all the telephone companies. You can't get another telephone. So the wait list is 9 months. They bring it in after 9 months of waiting, and basically it doesn't work. So you then go on and complain. And since with the lack of competition, we can't put people to compete to actually provide you a service and a good. Look, does that mean that that doesn't happen in the private sector? It absolutely does. I'm not saying that at all, because you can look at Microsoft and their monopoly practices was horrible, and I don't think I'll ever buy another Microsoft computer in my life. And yeah, the lack of competition I think is a serious problem, especially when you're state-owned ownership of something. There's no competition. People can't get the service elsewhere if they don't like the service they're getting from you. So that is another contention that I have. So yeah, it's incentive for people to work. Is there a competition if people don't like the service they're getting? Then it is also, what's the point of working? What's the point of having money in this society? You go out work, why? What's the point? Say what you will about the free market neoliberalism and all the problems it carries. I mean, inequality and a major problems that exist. But at least it provides an incentive for people. All right, that is Collateral Banter. I will continue on and talk more about this in the future. Take care.